great French mathematician Blaise Pascal reckoned that however long the odds against God's existence might be, you'd better believe in God, because if you are right, you stand to gain eternal bliss, and if you are wrong, it won't make any difference anyway. Nonfiction writer, atheist, scholar, evolutionary biologist, and popular science free thinker has assembled his thoughts and research on faith, spirit, and superstition in a must-read work called The God Delusion. It is my pleasure to welcome Richard Dawkins to Studio 4 to tell us more. Nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you.
When and why did you begin doubting the existence of a God?
About 9, I suppose, my mother told me that there were other religions than Christianity and that different people in different parts of the world believed different things. So it wasn't very difficult to work out that they couldn't all be right. And it was an accident that I happened to be brought up Christian. So I think that was when I first started to doubt.
When you were young and you asked your parents questions about God and the virgin birth and the Anglican faith, how did they respond?
Well, my memory is that my mother gave me fairly standard Christian answers, although she's not actually Christian. I think she was just kind of doing it as a sense of duty, you know, loyalty to the culture, brought up in a Christian world. And so she gave me the standard sort of answers about, you know, when the dog died, it had gone to the doggy heaven and that kind of thing.
Were your parents scientists in any way?
My father read botany at Oxford and was very good on wildflowers, and he and my mother both knew all the wildflowers, so we were brought up, my sister and I were brought up going on country walks and learning all the flowers and things. My father read a scientific subject at Oxford.
First proof in your mind where you felt, now I have proof that a supernatural creator did not make all of us. Where were you in your
Proof is a
career?
strong word. I wouldn't use a word like proof. I mean, only mathematicians really prove things. You can't prove that anything doesn't exist. You can't prove that God doesn't exist. All you can do is demonstrate to yourself that it's very unlikely. It's very improbable. And I think that was, for me, that was probably when I was about 16.
When science is wrong, the scientists very easily walk away from it, usually, unless they're too attached to it. But when science is wrong and they figure it out, they walk away and go on to the next experiment.
Well, yes.
When religious beliefs are wrong, people still believe.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about science is that you improve by being wrong. I mean, you get something wrong, and so you then go on to the next experiment, as you say, or you modify the idea, you change it a bit. You test a new idea. You disprove this one, you modify it, you test it again. So science works by making mistakes. Mistakes is not quite the right word, actually. It works by falsifying hypotheses and then putting forward a new hypothesis or modifying the old hypothesis. Religion, as you say, people just know they're right. It's written in the Holy Book. And if the evidence doesn't conform to the Holy Book, well, the evidence must be wrong. I mean, that you very often meet that. I've actually heard people pretty much say that.
Absolutism is a very difficult thing to deal with in the world, when there's no flexibility, no compassion, when there's only one way, when my way is the only way, or my God's way is the only way.
Yes. I mean, I think that's very true, and I think that absolutism actually can be quite wicked. Sometimes scientists are accused of being absolutist, and that's actually wrong, because scientists are basing it on evidence. There are times when we get a bit exasperated because the evidence for certain things is extremely strong. The evidence for evolution, for example, is absolutely overwhelming. And so you may hear tones of exasperation in a scientist's voice when meeting flat denial. It's a bit like Holocaust denial. When meeting flat denial, but that really isn't absolutism. That's always backed up by evidence. It's not saying, I know I'm right because my holy book says so.
What makes religion so attractive to believers?
Probably a mixture of things. It can be very consoling. If you're frightened of dying, for example, it can be consoling to think, well, I'm not really going to die. I'm going to go to heaven, and heavens are... The joys of heaven are deliberately exaggerated, of course. So that's one thing. If you're bereaved, you're delighted to feel you're going to meet your loved one again. If you're not very bright and you haven't really got much of a clue about where you came from and who made the world, it's an easy explanation to say God did it. It's a sort of uncomplicated way out to just explain everything by saying God did it. So people who don't really like thinking very much can find religion very appealing. But I think mostly people are just brought up from childhood, indoctrinated from childhood. And so it's very, very hard to shake off childhood indoctrination.
One of the key points in your book is not to label a child, a Muslim child, a Catholic child, a Buddhist child, a Tory child, to let the child learn to think. Don't tell the child how to think.
Well, you put your finger on it there when you said Tory child, because nobody ever would talk about a Tory child. You'd never talk about a Tory child or a liberal child or a postmodernist child or a secular humanist child. Once you put it like that, people get it. They realize, no, of course I wouldn't. I wouldn't dream of talking about a communist child. And yet, when it comes to religion, everybody, just about everybody, buys into the idea that you can talk about a Christian child, a Catholic child, a Muslim child. Why do we do it? We wouldn't, as I say, talk about a Keynesian child or a monetarist child. You don't label a child with the opinions of its parents in any other field than in religion. Yet in religion, we've all been brainwashed into accepting that you can talk about, say, a Catholic child or a Muslim child.
Not just a child, a Mormon candidate for presidency.